Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. I went down a Waylon Jennings rabbit hole last night. I mean, I went way down. I spent hours just looking up Waylon Jennings stuff. And somewhere in the bottom of that rabbit hole, I found an old auction site. There was an auction, an estate sale of Waylon Jennings stuff back in 2014. And the stuff's still up online. And I just started looking. There's over 2,000 things that they sold. And I just went through and looked at what all these things were, and it was pretty damn amazing. And I figured I'd show you guys the highlights of some of it. We'll start off with, I'm going to try to put the pictures up right here if I can figure out how to do that. But this is Willie Nelson's braids, Willie Nelson's hair. Waylon Jennings had it. This sold for $25,000. And the story was that in 1983, Waylon quit drugs and cocaine and, booze and all of that stuff. And Johnny Cash and June decided to have him a sobriety party to celebrate him going straight. And they got him presents. So Willie's present to Waylon to help cheer him on and to, help say, yeah, you can do this sobriety thing, was he cut his braids off and gave them to Waylon as a present. And this ended up being auctioned off in his estate. $25,000 for Willie Nelson's braids. So also in the estate sale was Hank Williams cowboy boots. Somehow Waylon ended up with Hank Williams cowboy boots that he would wear on stage. These sold for $8,000. And the story is Waylon supposedly wore those he got the boots and he wore them to a recording session in Nashville one night. All the power went out in the studio and the wind blew a tree down on top of somebody's car, and Waylon swore he's never going to wear those boots ever again. But they ended up in his estate sale, and it sold for $8,000. So this is a handwritten letter from John Lennon to Waylon Jennings. They had some chance meeting. I remember them talking about this in Waylon's book, his biography, where they had a chance meeting and they got along really well. And since John Lennon was a huge Buddy Holly fan, naturally he was going to dig Waylon. And Waylon said something to the effect of, I didn't expect you to be so funny. I didn't expect you to have such a good sense of humor, which is a weird thing to say, considering if the Beatles were anything, they were some of the funniest guys, very witty. And so he must not have seen any of the interviews or anything. And but I guess John wrote a letter pitching a song to Waylon, and this right here hung in Waylon's living room for the rest of his life, this picture. But this sold for $7,500. I'm going to see if I can blow this up and tell you what it says. It says, Dear Waylon, and he misspelled his name. This is typed out. He misspelled Waylon. It's Wayland, and then handwritten next to it, John wrote Waylon the right way. So sorry about that. 'Twas good to meet you. Try these on for size. It's a hit. I should have released it as a single myself, but I left it too late. But it ain't for someone else. All the best to you. Saw you on TV last week. Very good. Nice band. And then there's a little handwritten John smiley face and nice stuff. But it sold for $7,500. It's neat that Waylon dug that so much that he'd go ahead and hang that in his home. And there's all kinds of handwritten lyrics. Just so much, like spiral notebooks full of stuff, napkins with lyrics written on them. And the spiral notebooks, they would sell each one of these notebooks for different amounts of money. But when you go reading the description, you realize that this is how he wrote the book, his biography, or his autobiography. And he would sit there and write that by hand, which is neat to me because I would have thought that would have been a series of interviews where he would tell his stories I believe Lenny Kay was the person who helped him write that. I would have thought that it just would have been a series of interviews where he told stories and anecdotes, and then that would be turned into the book. That's usually how those things are done. It was neat that he wrote his anecdotes and his stories and stuff out by hand, and that there's actual physical ways to commemorate that. I love this about that era. It's kind of gone and past us, but people wrote things down on pieces of paper. You know, John Lennon sending a note to Waylon, or him writing lyrics or whatever. But all of that ended up being used in this book right here. I've done videos a couple years ago where I talked about this, and people seem to dig it. I think I sold a lot of these books for Waylon, but you ought to get it. It's really, really good. And the people who bought it all said that, got a lot of comments saying that they really enjoyed it. You might pick it up. I'll put a link down in the comments, and maybe I'll get a little bit of enough money to buy some cat food or something from those. I didn't do that before, so I'm not that bright, but the most expensive thing that went in this auction was Waylon's desk. It says it's a partner desk. I don't know a lot about desks, but it was given to Waylon by Johnny Cash in 1985 while recording The Highwayman. Waylon, in the drawers in the desk, Waylon used it as his black book. Just he would open the door, it'd be empty, and on the bottom of the drawers, he would write people's names and phone numbers. So whenever he needed a phone number, so you look in there and there's Willie, you know, there's Johnny Cash, Hank Jr., all these phone numbers, and that's kind of an interesting. I wouldn't have expected that to be the most expensive thing to go in this estate sale, but I can kind of see why. That's living history. That's that's his hand, and it's a nice piece that people could display easily. And I should say that sold for $70,000. It's a lot of money. That's the most expensive thing in the sale. There was a car. It was a 1978 Corvette that sold for $30,000. So $70,000 for a desk seems like a lot to me, but I can kind of understand it. Also, there were a lot of guitars for sale. When you think of that Telecaster, the Waylon Telecaster with, you know, there were 5 or 7 of those that sold. There were Fender custom shops, and I think they all went for around $10,000 a piece. I don't know if there's one, maybe you guys know that. Is there one definitive Waylon Telecaster that he used for a long period of time, and then there were copies of it? Or, I don't know, is that one out there somewhere? I think you guys probably know the answer to that, and you can tell me down below. But there was also a lot of acoustic guitars, and the most interesting one is a 1946 Martin D28 herringbone, and it says that this is the one that he would leave around the house and he would write songs on. So he wrote a lot of songs on this guitar. It sold for $26,000. A beautiful D28 and a 1946. That's probably a cool guitar. There's the original contract that put the Highwayman together. You never think about that, but if you're gonna, you know, there's contracts for everything, and you know, he sold the contract, that the legally binding thing that put the Highwayman together, for $18,000. So this is a pocket watch, a really nice pocket watch. It's called a Howard 23 jewel pocket watch on chain. This sold for $10,000. It was a gift from George Jones to Waylon and Jesse when Shooter Jennings was born. Beautiful old pocket watch. That's a classic gift. This really caught my attention, and I really, really dig this, but it's Muhammad Ali's Robe. This is a Robe, and also sold his gloves from, I guess, when Ali, the rematch with Leon Spinks, when Ali won the championship back. I remember watching this as a kid, but Ali, the first match, Ali didn't take it seriously, and he didn't train very well, and Leon Spinks surprised him and upset him, and he lost the championship. So the rematch, when Ali became a champion for the 3rd time, which is the first time any heavyweight had done it, it was a big deal. I loved Ali when I was a kid. You know, I still love Ali, but me and my dad would watch those fights together religiously. And I just remember sitting there watching this one. I mean, I remember the Foreman, Ali and Zaire, sitting there watching it with our neighbor. I wrote a song about it called Ghost of Our Fathers. Maybe you can find it on here. If not about that, I mention it in it. But so this is Ali's robe from that fight. It was his training robe. Sold for $5,000. So also, this is Ali's training gloves. These sold for $1,500, which, man, I'd like to have Ali's training gloves. I wouldn't be able to pay $1,500 for it, but this is Waylon here. Boxing is my favorite sport, and Ali is one of my heroes. I was in New Orleans on the night of September 15th, 1978 at the Ali versus Spinks fight when Ali regained his championship title for the third time. After the fight was over, I was invited to the champ's dressing room. It was a night I'll never forget. Here are the sparring gloves and robe from that fight. Waylon Jennings. And it says when Chris Christopherson introduced Ali and Waylon, and Chris said, "I've never seen two people like each other instantly like those two did." Waylon was thrilled. They also sold Waylon's passport that he used during the Highwayman, and that sold for $3,750. You never think about things like passports one day being collectible, but I think I remember seeing Elvis's passport out there sold at auction at one time. And I want to say also, I just remembered from the Ali robe and the boxing gloves, Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, who has the great guitar collection, he owns a robe and some gloves from Muhammad Ali, and I remember seeing those when I was in his office. I got to see his stuff a few years ago at the Colts complex, and I remembered seeing Ali robe and gloves. I wonder if he bought those from the Waylon estate. I mean, there's probably a lot of Ali robes and gloves out there, so it seems like his might have been from Zaire, but I don't remember for sure. But I thought I'd throw that in there. Maybe somebody knows. They never really say who bought the stuff. It's probably to protect the buyers from weirdos like me wanting to look it up. This is really interesting to me that this did not sell, but he owned Buddy Holly's motorcycle, and the starting bid was $50,000, and nobody bid on it. And that's interesting to me, but there's a story behind it. I remember them telling the story in this book. I remember him telling that, but it says, I'll read a little bit of that for you here, but on May 13th, 1958, three young, very exhausted, and newly successful musicians found their way to Ray Miller's motorcycle shop in Dallas, Texas. They were at the forefront of creating a style of music that was rapidly redefining America's musical taste. Having just returned home to Texas from a world tour, the trio set out to buy new motorcycles as presents for themselves to celebrate their hard work and good fortune. Upon landing in Dallas, they made a spur-of-the-moment decision to skip their connecting flight home. They decided to each buy a motorcycle and drive back home on the motorcycles. Their love of Marlon Brando and the Wild Ones inspired their decision. Taking a cab from Love Field into the city, they walked into a Harley-Davidson dealership where they were shown the door by the proprietor, who failed to recognize the young celebrities, thinking instead that they were bums. Their next stop was at Ray Miller's Triumph and Ariel motorcycle shop. When they walked in, both the owner and his mechanic recognized them instantly, and they were given the royal treatment. Joe Maudlin, the Cricket's bass player, immediately fell in love with a Triumph Thunderbird motorcycle and bought it. Jerry Allison, their drummer, bought a Triumph trophy. Buddy Holly was transfixed by a dark red Ariel Cyclone 650cc in the showroom and decided that it was the bike for him. That model, only built that 1 year, 1958, with only a production number of 200, impressed Buddy as something very unique and special, and he knew that he had to own that bike. Buddy picked out the Ariel, and they all paid in cash. Besides their new wheels, the trio purchased matching Levi jackets and peaked caps adorned with wings. Buddy, Joe, and Jerry rode the 350-mile trip home in a thunderstorm. That's freaking beautiful, man. That's beautiful. I hope for my motorcycle buddies, man, I don't know how to pronounce Ariel. It's a 1958 ARIEL Cyclone motorcycle. It's an Ariel, but nobody bought that. I wonder where the bike is today. That's beautiful. It was later given to Waylon as a present. So Waylon ended up with Buddy Holly's bike all those years. And I think that's beautiful. Also, there's so many things that didn't sell. Like when I go to some kind of an estate sale, I usually am not looking to spend much money. I love auctions and estate sales and stuff like that, though. But I just want to find some little something, that I can afford, that I feel like I got a piece of something that I care about. And so I was looking through and trying to figure out what my versions of those would be, and there were all kinds of contracts. There were a lot of photos, a lot of things scribbled on napkins and stuff like that. Some of those didn't sell, but the contracts were very interesting to me, and I looked through all these different touring contracts, and I found one from Crawfordsville, Indiana, to play at a high school in Crawfordsville High School in 1969. It was a contract for Waylon to play there, and it didn't sell. I probably could have bought that for $100 at the time, and I think I would have, and probably would have framed it. But you guys remember the episode when I had just gotten back from England, and the Beatles' Get Back had just premiered, and I watched it, and I was standing outside kind of losing my mind at how great it was. I filmed that in Crawfordsville, and it was very close to the high school there where Waylon once played. I didn't know Waylon Jennings played in high school there. And so I looked that up, and it was a Wednesday night, and he appeared for $1,500. And he was in the contract. It's interesting to see what's not in the contract. All that's really in it is he needs to show up in a 5-piece band, and he'll make $1,500. It doesn't say you play this long. It doesn't say you get this hotel. It is really bare bones, but it's a contract. So he played on that Wednesday night at Crawfordsville High School in Indiana, rural Indiana. I got to looking around a month earlier. I believe it was a month earlier. He played at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, Coliseum. This is a place where the Beatles played. It's kind of a famous deal where the Beatles showed up and played State Fairgrounds Coliseum. This is where I saw Dick the Bruiser beat the hell out of the Valiants when I was a kid, feud with Ernie Ladd. Him and the Crusher would tag team against people like the Valiants or Ox Baker and whoever the hell. That used to happen. That's where I used to go see that stuff. That's where, when I was a kid, I saw Wayne Gretzky play hockey for Indianapolis Racers. He was in Indianapolis's minor league organization, and I went and saw that. So this is in that same place, and I've actually played at the Coliseum once, years ago. But that's where Waylon Jennings played on a package show for WIRE, which was our local AM country radio station. They would have an annual thing called the WIRE Picnic, which was an outdoor show, and I would go to that, when I was a kid, every time I could. This isn't that, but it was a package show at the Coliseum with Porter Wagner, Dolly Parton, and I forget who else was on it. But it was just a month earlier that he played the high school out there, and he played for the same amount of money, $1,500, in 1969. I looked up the inflation calculator. That's $12,900 and something now. But I thought it was interesting that in 1969, there was no concerns about blacking out dates. One, he went back to towards Texas and played in Houston and Dallas in between these two dates. So he went across the country. He went out to Arizona, came all the way back to Indiana. and did those two dates like 30 days apart. And now there's no way that would happen. There's no way that would happen. But I found it really interesting, and I would have absolutely bought. Actually, the contract for the Indiana State Fair did sell for $200. And I say the State Fair, it's the Indiana Coliseum is what they call it, but it's on the State Fairgrounds, you know what I'm saying. But I absolutely would have bought that. That would have been the thing that I would have tried to buy, and I would have framed it. If I didn't hang it in my own home, I would have taken it to a local venue like the Hi-Fi and had them hang it up there as a piece of history. And, but anyway, I figured I would show you guys that. There's a lot more, just so much stuff that I could go down the rabbit hole forever, but I thought you guys might appreciate that. And there's a lot more Waylon stories in this compilation I put together. If you haven't watched that, watch that right now. I think you'll dig it. And I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.